Welcome back to Rod's Radios. Here in North County Dublin there is located a vintage radio museum, and for many years this was run by a gentleman called Pat Herbert, who sadly passed away. And from his own private collection, not the museum collection, there was an auction consisting of dozens and dozens of radios of various types, transistor radios, valve radios, etc., etc. And I was lucky enough to secure what we see here today. It's a Philips B6X72A, and it dates from around 1957-1958. So today we're going to have a closer look at it. I haven't looked at it yet, so why don't you join me on this adventure? Let's have a look at the front first of all. This is a big radio. It's over 60 centimeters wide. And Philips, in their wisdom, classified their radios in terms of B1 up to B8. The B1 being the simplest small radios, maybe 4 or 5 valves or tubes, whereas the bigger ones up at the top end of the range were much higher quality, big wooden cabinets, something similar to this, although this one is a B6. But it sits fairly close towards the top end of the market at the time. So let's have a look at the front here. And we can see over on the left-hand side, we have the volume control and a bass control here. And when you turn the bass control, I can see here at the front, there's normally a little shutter here that you can see closed at the moment. And as you turn the bass control, that opens and closes, just to give you some idea of the level of bass. And there's quite a nifty picture on the front, just above the piano key buttons, of an orchestra that you can see. And the shutters for the bass are on the left, and the treble here over on the right. And the treble control then is over on the very right-hand corner here. Now that's completely stuck. That's not moving at all, so that's seized up. That'll have to be attended to. And on the front here, we have various different wave bands that you activate with the switch here. The first one is the off switch for switching off the radio. The next one is a pickup. Oh, it's come on. I won't switch it on even though I've plugged it in yet. The next one is a long wave switch, medium wave switch, short wave, and VHF. So this should be a pretty good radio because it has 2 very large speakers. You can see a shadow here of the main speaker on the left and a smaller shadow of a second speaker. And this radio has the moniker bi-ampli. Now bi-ampli on a radio normally meant that you had 2 separate output stages, one feeding the bass speaker and a separate one feeding the treble speaker. However, Philips, I know, even though they had this logo on their radio, didn't stick to the real meaning of bi-ampli. And sometimes they just joined the speakers onto one single output stage. So I won't find that out until I open the back and have a look inside. But on the front, going back to the controls, we have these buttons on the top. I've never seen these before, and I'm presuming these are tone controls. And they're labelled Modest, Orchestra, and Parola, whatever that means. Now the Parola one is missing. There's nothing in there at all. So we'll have to see what is causing that. And then over on the right-hand side, there is a Magic Eye tube. And again, the Magic Eye was only fitted to radios from the higher end of the market. So this B6 should be an interesting one to look at. It's going to be a very good quality radio if we get it working, which I hope we do. As I say, this was the first time I switched it on, and I see the pilot light came on the front, so hopefully that will indicate that there is some sort of life in this chassis. So I'll turn it around the back and we'll have a look to see what lies in store for us. Looking in at the back of the set, I can see that this radio is just as substantial from the back as it was from the front. This is a big radio, as I said, and it consists of 9 valves actually in this, including the Magic Eye, and 2 very substantial loudspeakers. This one here I think is about 8 by 6 inches, and this is about 6 by 4 inches. So the sound on this radio should be pretty hot. But what is most unusual is this arrangement here that I saw from the front, the 3 what I presume are tone control buttons. And they're connected by these Bowden cables, 1, 2, 3 Bowden cables that run up to a bank of switches over on the right-hand side of the radio here. So that's most unusual, but typical Philips. If you can do something more difficult than normal, they'll do it. Also, I can see there's a piece of cardboard in here for some reason, green and red. I don't know why that's there at all. But other than that, the radio looks intact. And the fact that the pilot light came on when I switched it on for a short while at the front earlier means that it may be working. I hope it is. I can see too that some of the valves here are of mixed variety, so they've been changed somewhere along the way. But that's not surprising. Don't forget this radio is, 65 years old now at this stage? So it's bound to have had a bit of work done. There's another resistor in there at the back on the Magic Eye that's been replaced. Other than that, the chassis is a bit grubby, but that can be cleaned up. That's not a problem. And down here we can see the data plate from Philips to show it's a B6X72A, as I said. And over on this side is the IF frequency, which in this case is 452 kilohertz. So I'm hoping that this radio is actually going to work in some fashion. It will need a little bit of work done on it. For instance, I can see big black waxy capacitors on the back here. There's one there, and there's another tucked in down there. They'll need to be replaced. But other than that, this bodes well for the future. So I think it's time to switch it on and see if we can hear anything at all. So the moment of truth, is it going to work? I'm going to switch it on, but I have it wired in via this dim bulb up here, and the dim bulb will mitigate against any short circuits in the radio. What should happen is that when I switch on, the dim bulb will come on for a short time, light up, and then fade away as the current builds up in the radio. And hopefully it will mitigate against any short circuits, but I don't think there is any, because I did see the pilot light come on earlier. So I'm going to switch it on to long wave and we'll see what happens. Dim bulb comes on and starts to fade away. That's good news. The pilot light is on the radio itself, so let's turn up the volume and see if anything happens. Like all valve radios, it takes a minute or so to heat up. Sound.
In Russia and to reopen later when conditions improve.
And what's happening then to the workers in those companies? What's the impact on them?
Well, again, it's mixed picture. Companies like
Pretty good. That's our local RTE from Longwave, the national broadcaster, and the radio sounds pretty good.
Because their local operator has simply refused to close. And a lot of these businesses are localized.
Let's see if anything else comes on along the band. Very poor, but this Radio 4 from BBC is a long, long way away from here in Dublin, so it's not surprising. And that's all I would expect on long wave. Let's see if there's anything on medium wave. I'll roll it back down again to the beginning.
I wonder if there was a little touch from your hand.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
I have just the tiniest neck on it with its head. And that's got me.
The volume control is a little bit noisy. That'll need a little bit of lubrication. But so far so good. And nothing much else. I wouldn't expect much else. This is the middle of morning at the moment, so we won't get much on medium wave. Short wave, I doubt we'll get anything. Certainly not this time of day. No, it's very quiet. And finally, let's see if there's anything on VHF. Now, there is a problem here. There's no indicator for the VHF band. Normally, this should be separate to this one here. And there's nothing happening, so no sign of VHF, although there is noise in the background, which is a good sign. So a little bit of work has to be done on this. I'll take the chassis out and examine it. I do need to replace the capacitors. I need to check the noisy volume control and fix the little shutters on the front here. Of course, VHF, I have to sort out why there is no indicator here. The needle may have fallen off the dial drive. I have to sort out this seized control. There's no movement at all on this. And generally fettle up the radio, but it's sounding pretty good so far. So, onwards and upwards. I've extracted the chassis from the cabinet, as you can see here, and before doing so I had a look at the service manual for this particular radio, and I noticed that the loudspeakers are actually high impedance types. They're 800 ohms, which is kind of unusual. Most radios of this vintage operate with 4 ohm speakers, so 800 is quite a significant difference. So I'm going to have to be careful in that I can't use the normal workshop loudspeakers for testing this radio when we get going later on. However, back to the main problem here, and what's happening is that the FM section isn't working, it isn't tuning. The pulleys and cables aren't moving when FM is selected. And how it operates is that behind this flywheel here there are 3 rubber pulleys, and the central section moves either left or right depending on the buttons that are selected here. So for the AM buttons, these 3 here, the center pulley moves over to the left and makes contact with another rubber pulley that drives this set of wires and cables, tuning the AM condenser. When FM is selected, another wire is linked from a lever underneath here to a pulley on the top that moves over here and drags the central rubber pulley over to the right, thus engaging with a different pulley, which now operates a set of wires that go around pulleys here and now tunes the FM condenser, which is over here. So something has gone radically wrong here, and I think what happened was that both pulleys were engaged at the one time for some reason, and it dragged the FM indicator right along here and disengaged. You can actually see it hanging down here. This was the missing FM indicator. So I think I'm going to have to inspect what's going on behind this flywheel to see if we can rectify the problem. So that's going to be interesting. With the flywheel removed, I can see that things are slightly different from what I expected. It's the outer wheels that move rather than the center one, and these are attached to a plate, and as you can probably see here, this is extremely stiff. They hardly move at all, so they're pretty well gummed up. And the other difference is that the wheels, I think, are actually brass. They're not rubber wheels on the outside. However, the inside one on the flywheel is of a rubbery compound, although it's pretty well desiccated and dried up. So I'm not surprised that between the lack of movement of the 2 outer wheels and the desiccated state of the inner wheel here, nothing much was happening. In fact, it's a miracle that the AM section moved at all. And I can see where someone at some stage has covered the FM side, which mustn't have been working for a long, long time, with some sort of tape to give it some sort of traction. But I don't think it was that successful. As we can see, it's not working at the moment. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to get this back in action again. I may be able to just clean up the outer wheels and do something about the inner one here to restore the traction or friction that it needs to move the 2 outer wheels. So at this stage, I think we'll tail off on part 1 of this video, and I'll come back in part 2 when hopefully I've made a little bit of progress. See you then. Thanks for watching.